Hello everyone, welcome back to Chill Trades, where I make it my job to analyze stocks so you know what's going on. Today we'll be talking about Tesla, which if you're watching this video, you're probably a fan, much like I am. But we're going to be analyzing if the trend has reversed. Obviously Tesla's been through some turmoil over the last few months, and is it time for it to go higher, or is this just a little fake out? But if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and join the squad. We have about 40 subscribers over the last couple of weeks, so thank you everyone who has joined, and hopefully more can join. We can grow this family and community. But let's dive right into things. So Tesla's been kind of on a tear, much like most stocks, since mid-May kind of range, and especially the last couple days. So let's zoom in so we can see what's happened more recently. And so as you can see, the last 2 days we have some pretty big price movement. So yesterday we saw a really big green candle, which is typically a pretty bullish sign. When you have really big candles, that means there's a lot of buying volume, and that was followed by a gap fill or a gap up the next day. And we have this big kind of wick at the top of the candle we'll talk about in a second. But when we look at more macro, big picture to see if the trend is reversing, the first thing I want to look at is the RSI. So when we zoom out a bit, what we can see is when RSI is kind of above this 53 to 48 range, the stock is typically in a bullish cycle or a bullish momentum. Because what you can see here is above that range and we've been going up. But as soon as we broke below that range, we've been in a downtrend. And so what we saw is as of June 21st, a couple days ago, we actually broke back above that trading range for the RSI. And so what we're going to want to watch more for the big picture, and if this is a trend reversal, is if we stay above this trading, this kind of 53 to 48 range on RSI. If we stay above there and start moving back and forth, kind of like we did in the past, that probably means the stock could be moving higher in the short to intermediate term. The second thing I want to look at is that these two big candles last couple days, one allowed us to move above the 50-day moving average, and the second day, which is today, for a moment and kind of right now, moved us above the 100-day SMA. And so these are two positive signs as well, is because now we're above the 200, the 50-day, and the 100-day. One thing that we eventually want to see change is we're going to want to see the 50-day curl above the 100-day and the price to be above all of those. So typically, for more macro speaking for a stock or more long term, we want the 200-day, the 100-day, and then the 50-day stacked with the price moving above it. And so we're going to need to see that correction with the SMAs in order to know that this is a long-term reversal for the stock. When we dive in kind of like what we could see for the short term or intermediate term, we've kind of gapped up into this trading range. So when we look in the past, we see kind of like a lot of accumulation or consolidation in this 657 to 719 range. And so what I could suspect is probably some motion in here or some movement, because we did have two really big days and we had a big wick here. I'm going to be looking for consolidation in this zone as well as a gap fill. So when we zoom in, what we see is yesterday hit the edge or the bottom of this consolidation zone. And what happens a lot of time is for people use aftermarket and pre-market to help gap a stock up. And what happens is it helps gap a stock. It helps gap a stock up into an area that was a big resistance, and that's kind of what we saw here. So if I kind of draw this out, what I'm going to be looking for is maybe something like this, and then eventually a gap fill. For long-term health, we want to make sure that we're filling all the gaps in the stocks, because what that does is it creates a really healthy trend for the more long-term. And so I'm going to be looking for something like this over the next few days. If we do end up going higher, maybe retesting this high from today, I still eventually want to see this come back down at some point and fill that gap. The sooner the better, because we're fighting against two trend lines to the upside. So as you can see, today we broke above the long-term downtrend line, which is extremely bullish. But if we come down and test this trend line faster, or this gap fill faster, then we can stay above the long-term downtrend line and not break below our upward trend line. So we've kind of forming we're forming this upward trading range, and it would be very bullish to keep this trend. What we typically want to see is for long-term success, we want the angle of the channel angle to be no more than about 45 degrees. When we see steeper trading ranges and or trading trend lines, the steeper the angle, the harder it is for that stock to hold. So like I said before, having this come up, come back, test this trend line, stay above, or test this bottom of the range and stay above the downward trend line is going to be very bullish for this stock. If we can manage to do those two things, I have a couple price targets. So if we stay in the trading range right here in this kind of orange color, I'm going to be looking for a breakout above the range at about 719 and a gap fill. We have a gap fill on the stock, so if I zoom in, we can see I keep drawing. We can see a gap fill here. So that gap fill is at 732. So 720 to 732 is going to be my short-term price target if we continue positive momentum and see volume continue to come in. Assuming the positives don't happen, we want to also know where support is. And so when we come in here, the first range of support is the bottom of the gap as well as the bottom of the trading range, which is at about 657. That's a really important price to keep track of, because if we can manage to go up, keep above the downward trend line and fill the gap and test the bottom of the range, that's going to be very positive momentum moving forward. And then we eventually want something like this. So those are a couple things we want to look at. If we for some reason happen to, let me get rid of this drawing. If we for some reason happen to move lower, we have a really big consolidation range from the past. So that consolidation range from the past is from that 657 range to about 620. And so what we see is it's above the more recent accumulation zone, which is back here, and it's right above it. So if we do for some reason see the stock break below, we're going to see it probably consolidate here. And if it does consolidate, we really need the stock to hold this trend line. This is, what is it called? Line in the sand or whatever people consider that term. This is kind of the last ditch effort. We need to hold this. If we don't hold this trading range and we eventually do something like come down here and break below, if we break below both this downward trend line and the upward trend line, then there's a high probability we come back down to this range. So those are a couple things to look out for. Again, we're in a trading range. My short-term price target is 720 to 732, and I'll put all these notes in the description. That's gonna be my short-term price range. If we see a lot of momentum and a lot of volume, then my price range is going to be somewhere between 780 to 753 range. If we break down, we're going to want to look for this range, which is around 620 to 657 as for some accumulation. But like I said, we need to hold this trend line. This is line in the sand. We need to hold that. I want to know what you think. Where do you think the stock is headed? Do you think we're going to continue to push enough volume to keep the stock up? Or do you think there's going to be more downside? But that's all I have for you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I would suggest you watching it a couple times because I went through even more technicals than I typically do in a video. And the more you watch it, the more you're going to digest the information so you can do it yourself. A couple other quick things I want to call out. We have a Discord group. It's going to be in the description. Go ahead and join that. More people are joining and it's becoming more and more active, which is a great thing. And I also stream on Twitch on Saturdays and Sundays. So Saturdays, me and my buddy play games and talk about stocks. And then on Sunday, it's a free-for-all where you can ask me any of your stock questions. And I'll do this kind of live charting. I'll do this charting live on the stream. So please go check those all out. If you made it this long, please subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll talk to you again next time.